Hi, my name is Margaret and welcome to my artsy corner of the internet. First of all, I have to address it. I crocheted this a while ago and I do not know what possessed me to put on these circles. It was a choice that I made, okay? But if nothing else, this is like a little Land of the Sweets hoodie. Anyway, it is still holiday season, and what better way to spend it than literally sit inside of a tree. I hope that I can put you guys a little bit in the holly jolly spirit when we talk about the plot of the Nutcracker. Like, what is going on there? Let's get into it. So the first thing that I have to address is the fact that every Nutcracker has a different plot. What's the point of doing a plot video if every ballet has a different plot? The main plot of the ballet will be the same for most renditions of the Nutcracker, but every single company or studio or school or whoever is putting on the Nutcracker is going to have a different take on the story. So I'm gonna try to give you like the most bare bones basic plot. The Nutcracker is actually based off of this book. It's called The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, and it's by E.T.A. Hoffmann. It was written in 1816. And then a retelling of E.T.A. Hoffmann's tale, The History of the Nutcracker, was written by Alexander Dumas in the 1840s. I believe it was 1844. I actually just bought that one this year, so I haven't finished reading Dumas's tale, but both of those stories are very different than the ballet because, like, you know how when your favorite book gets turned into a movie, they have to take out a bunch of stuff from the book. Well, when your favorite book gets turned into a ballet, they have to take out even more because there's lots of long swaths of just straight up dancing with no plot development. So like, you gotta take out a lot of the plot, you know? So I wanna start out with, usually there's an overture, the dun, 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 dun. The overture is my favorite part of the whole ballet. Not necessarily because it's like the most exciting part of the ballet, but for me, I love seeing what different companies do with the overture. In one version that I saw last year, they're like ice skating, which is cute. In another one, it'll be like Drosselmeyer in his workshop getting ready. In other versions, it's them setting up the parlor. In other versions, it's guests arriving. So the overture is always really fun. It just kind of sets the scene. Then we get into the actual Nutcracker, and the original Nutcracker was set in Germany in 1820. So that's kind of like the fancy 1820s party with like the pretty dresses and everything is like Victorian, Edwardian, and beautiful. And we are in the Stahlbaum's parlor. The Stahlbaums. I've watched so many videos on how to say Stahlbaum, but what can I say? I live in the South. I'm like, the Stahlbaums. Anyway, so we are in their parlor, and a parlor is like a fancy living room where you might accept guests or have a party. And a party we are having because it is Christmas Eve. And so the parents are in there, maybe a couple maids or other people are around, and they're putting the finishing touches, all the decorations, the Christmas tree. It looks so cute. And their children are locked out of the room because the parents said, we can't have you messing everything up. And also they're like, let us surprise you with all these pretty Christmas decorations. And so at some point the children are let into the big parlor and they come in. Now, who are the children? We have Clara, which you've probably heard of her because she's like the star. In some versions she's named Marie, and that is from the original E.T.A. Hoffmann tale. Her name is Marie. And I don't know exactly, honestly, where Clara came from, but now she's Clara, so we're gonna call her Clara. Now, Clara has a younger brother named Fritz, and Fritz is a menace to society. And that's all you need to know about him. But he is her younger brother, and sometimes there will be an older sister named Louise, but I feel like a lot of ballets kind of cut her out because she doesn't really do much for the plot. And also, like, if you don't have another dancer who can play Louise and there's already so many roles to cover in the Nutcracker, she kind of gets the X a lot of the time. But I digress. So the children come into the parlor and they're like, oh wow, look at it, so much Christmas and festive and beautiful. And then the guests start arriving. And once the guests are there, dancing ensues, and that's pretty typical for ballets when dancing ensues in a ballet. But this one makes a little bit more sense because it's like a Christmas party, so of course they're dancing and having a good time. I feel like the first act, there is so much freedom for ballet companies to choose what they want to do with it, and so you'll see a lot of different renditions of dances. Sometimes it's like a parent's dance, sometimes it's just the kids dancing, sometimes they'll have like maids come out and dance with like fancy cakes on platters. So there's a lot of fun stuff that will happen, but you're basically watching like a fancy 1800s Christmas party. Oftentimes also presents are given out, but at 8 p.m. on the dot, Drosselmeyer arrives. Okay, and we know it's 8 p.m. on the dot because there's a giant grandfather clock, usually, on stage with an owl on top, and it chimes. And when it chimes 8 o'clock, Drosselmeyer arrives. And now listen, you know Drosselmeyer. Even if you don't think you know him because he is iconic. Now, Drosselmeyer is Clara and Fritz's godfather, not uncle. I veto any version that says that he is the uncle because you'll see later, the family trees start to... Okay, godfather, Drosselmeyer arrives. Now, he is a councilman or a judge or a lawyer or something like that, right? But he's also a magician. And he's also a toy maker, okay? This man has side gigs. He also usually has a top hat and a giant cape and a long beard and an eye patch, and honestly, goals. So Drosselmeyer's here now, okay? And all the children are so excited because I kind of imagine that, like, when all these kids are getting ready to go to this Christmas party, they're like, I can't wait. Do you think Drosselmeyer will be there? So Drosselmeyer comes in and is like, everybody settle down, I'm here. The party can really begin. And he pulls out sometimes 2 to 3 life-sized boxes. And inside of these are giant toys that dance. There's usually like a soldier and a Harlequin doll. I don't know what a Harlequin doll is, to be completely honest, but I'm assuming it's a doll. There's another one called the Columbine doll. And apparently in the OG Russian 1892 Nutcracker, the Columbine doll jumped out of a cabbage. I've never seen that in a modern adaptation, but I would love to. But there's also a rendition that has a giant dancing bear, and they do a dance for all the children there. And then afterwards, he's like, guys, I've saved my best toy for last. And then he pulls out this doll that's about this big, okay? So you're like, oh, it's small, what does it do? It's a nutcracker. It cracks nuts. That's all it does. Okay, and most of the kids are like, oh, I just saw a life-size dancing bear. What do I... Like, sorry to the Nutcracker, but like, if I just saw a life-size dancing bear, I'd be like, okay, cool, I can go eat walnuts and it'll be slightly easier. But Clara is not like that, okay? Clara is in love. She says that is the most beautiful doll I have ever seen. Now, this is also something, in a lot of renditions of the Nutcracker, Clara is specifically given the Nutcracker. Drosselmeyer is like, Clara, you're my favorite. Here's a special toy just for you. It is a Nutcracker. And Clara loves it. And all the other kids have like their own dolls or like their own presents. And they're like, oh, I love this beautiful little doll. And Clara is just like, look at this ugly Nutcracker. I love him, okay? And it is canon that the Nutcracker is ugly. However, in the original tale of the Nutcracker is given to all of the children, or at least it's given to Fritz and Clara. So that's a fun fact. Clara is in love with this doll. Sometimes, usually, she'll do a little dance with it and be like, guys, look at this doll. But then tragedy falls because the Nutcracker breaks. Different renditions will have the Nutcracker break in different ways. When I was a kid, the Fritz and our Nutcracker literally took the Nutcracker and just like broke it over his knee. As I said, menace to society. In the original Nutcracker, Fritz doesn't like intentionally break it. Like they're just like cracking a bunch of nuts and it breaks. It's crazy how many different ways you can do the same story, but it all ends with the Nutcracker being broken. And Clara is heartbroken. She is distraught. Drosselmeyer, our fave, he comes over, he's like, don't worry, I am a magician toy maker. I got this. And he fixes it up right there. He's like, don't even worry about it. He's fine. But like in the original, like the Nutcracker is a real dude. So I'm like, what happened to him? Like they broke a real man. The real man was a Nutcracker, but like that, I hope he can't feel pain. Anyway, we're asking too many questions about the story now. All that aside, Drosselmeyer fixes the Nutcracker with magic. All is well. And the parents are like, okay, that was so much fun. It's probably like 9 o'clock at night now. We're gonna go. I imagine that like this is the time in the party when you're like, wow, everything's going really well. And then you turn around for like 2 seconds and like when you turn back, like all of the children are just crying or screaming. Anyway, it's the end of the party and all the parents are like, okay, that's enough holly jolly. It's time to go to bed now. And so slowly all the families start trickling out and you know, the Stabalms are there and they're all like curtsying and being all cute in their little dresses. I love the dresses in the Nutcracker, okay? The opening scene, all the pretty dresses. I just want to let you know, if you ever go to a Nutcracker at a studio, that all of the girls in that party scene, there is one good dress, okay? There is one dress that everybody wants. And there's always like one dress that is just like gross. It's like hasn't been replaced in 20 years and you're just like, ugh, I got this dress. Anyway, so all the families are moving out. That's how it ends. But that's not the end of Act 1. What, do you think just because the party ended that the party ended? No. Clara comes sneaking down the stairs, right? She went up to bed. Sometimes it's like when the Nutcracker's broken, she runs off distraught up to her room. Most of the time it's just like, okay, kids, go to bed, and she goes up to bed. But once everybody's gone and it's nighttime, she sneaks back down the stairs and she comes back into the parlor to check on her Nutcracker. This is where it starts to get real, okay? Sometimes she'll like fall asleep on the couch with her Nutcracker. Other times she's just around. So is the Nutcracker a dream or not? Let's just assume she's sleeping because it makes it more convenient, okay? Because next part is my favorite part of the whole ballet. All of a sudden, this little mouse scurries across stage. You're like, uh-oh, okay? And then there's more mice that scurry across stage. I think I'm supposed to be scared of these mice because they are technically like the villains, right? But almost every Nutcracker makes the little babies, like the little 4-year-olds, be the mice. And I'm sorry, but I think they're the protagonists. These cute little babies in these little mice costumes going like, oh, it's so cute. That was not cute because I'm an adult. But oh, the mice are my favorite. Every Clara ever is like, how am I supposed to be scared of these little adorable little babies dressed up as little mice and like they steal the presents? Oh, they're so cute. Anyway, so Clara wakes up to find herself being invaded by little mice. Probably not very fun, okay? If they were like real mice, like, ugh, yeah, no, I wouldn't be too happy about that either. But you're like, okay, but like they're mice, right? They're tiny. Like, why are you scared of mice? They're so small. And that's when Clara notices the Christmas tree, okay? It's either growing or she's shrinking, right? We don't know. We do. In actuality, like the Christmas tree is growing, which I think is kind of implying that she's shrinking, but I don't know, maybe everything's just growing around her. Doesn't really matter because it's kind of, if you think about it, the same thing. But anyway, the Christmas tree is growing. She is shrinking. Okay, mice are probably a lot more terrifying if you are the same size as them. But what we also don't realize is that as Clara is shrinking, the Christmas tree is growing. So is her Nutcracker, okay? Her Nutcracker is no longer, okay? He's now big, okay? And he's also now a real man because, okay, he's also now alive, okay? He's a real man. Like, actually, like, we swapped out the little wooden prop for an actual dancer now. So now the Nutcracker's there and Clara's like, oh my gosh, amazing, help with these mice, right? Okay, and the Nutcracker's like, don't worry, I got you because I have battalions. Is that the right word? I don't know. There is like a large group of toy soldiers, right? And the Nutcracker is like, attack, okay? And the mice are like, ah, but then they start, okay? A whole battle is about to wage on this stage. And this is when the true bad guy, okay, the big bad boss at the end of the video game comes out, okay? It is a 7-headed mouse king, but also usually he doesn't have 7 heads because 7 heads would probably be a costuming nightmare, let alone trying to dance with 7 heads. Like, you're already in one giant head and you can't see, so like, and also there's a bunch of like babies around on stage and you're dancing in a head mask, but you can't really see much. So anyway, usually the Rat King has 1 head, but we all know in actuality he has 7. So the battle is raging. We don't know who's gonna win. You think the soldiers are ahead and then it's not. Then you think the mice are ahead, but then they're not. But at the last moment, okay, the Rat King has the Nutcracker cornered. The Rat King is about to win. And Clara's like, I just met the love of my life and now he's gonna get killed by a rat. Like, 20 minutes after meeting him. This is not okay. So Clara takes off her shoe and throws it at the Rat King and is like, hey, buddy. Okay, exact quote. And the Rat King is like, who just threw their shoe at me? And that distraction gives the Nutcracker just enough time to get the final blow in. The Nutcracker I did when I was younger, Rat King on the ground, twitching, small, like 3-year-old babies pull a grown man off stage. Cutest thing I've ever seen. With that, the battle comes to a close. The foe is gone. And the Nutcracker is like, Clara, you saved me. We're all very happy because this whole time, usually the Nutcracker has like this giant like fake head on that looks like a Nutcracker. And usually it's around this time that like he like disappears and then comes back and is like, I'm a real boy. Turns from a Nutcracker to a prince. And so he says, Clara, come with me to celebrate. in my kingdom. So the Nutcracker decides to take Clara on a magical journey, but before they get to his kingdom, they must travel through the candy cane forest and the broken bridge. That's elf. But first they must travel through the winter woods. I don't know what it's actually called. I don't know if it's actually called the Winter Woods, but it's like the place where the snow fairy, the snow queen, lives. And this is where we get the waltz of the flowers. Nope, that's totally wrong. This is where we get the waltz of the snowflakes. So they come out and they're like, and at the end, usually like the prince will push Clara through on like a magical sleigh if the production has a budget for a magical sleigh. They're traveling through the woods to the Candyland. It's not actually called Candyland, the land of the sweets. And that is where Act 1 closes. Now we are here to Act 2, and we have left all plot, all narrative, all sense of story in Act 1. We're not here for a story, we are here for a good time. Clara and the prince are arriving in the land of the sweets, which is where the prince is the prince of, okay? The Nutcracker, well, the Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is a prince, and the prince is the prince of the land of the sweets. But since he's been gone, because he's been a Nutcracker for like the past, like, however long, the Sugar Plum Fairy has been reigning as like his regent. So she's been in charge of everything, keeping everything cool and run properly while he's been a Nutcracker. And he's like, guys, look, I am not a Nutcracker anymore. And the Nutcracker then tells the story of what happened. So he has this whole pantomime scene where he's like, and then I was fighting the Rat King, and then she took her shoe and threw it. And he basically like, if you show up late to the Nutcracker and you're only catching the second act, the Nutcracker is going to summarize everything for you. He's going to be like, you missed it, but don't worry, I got you. And everybody in the land of the sweets is like, oh my goodness, Clara, we must dance for you to thank you for everything that you've done. And then we get into the part of the ballet that is called like the divertissements. Yes, it's the land of sweets, but we call them divertissements because they're just like, I don't know, it's like the ballet word for like a small dance, and that doesn't really add to the plot. At this point, the Nutcracker kind of splits. Some people go with a food-based Nutcracker, some people go with an ethnicity-based Nutcracker. The first dance we see is Spanish chocolate. You'll notice that a lot of the dances have a food item as well as like an ethnicity or a location, and in the original it was like Spanish hot chocolate, and now you've kind of seen like some of them will break it up and it will just be a hot chocolate dance, or it will just be a Spanish dance. So that really is kind of up to the company on whether, you know, they're gonna go full and do like a flamenco number, or if they're just gonna be like, it's a brown tutu because chocolate. But originally it was a Spanish hot chocolate. It was the first one. And then after she's done dancing, we go into what is usually called the Arabian dance, but it is Arabian coffee. The Arabian song is one of my favorite songs from the Nutcracker. And then after that, you'll go into the Chinese tea dance. After that, you will go into the candy canes or the Russian. This one's a little funny because you know how I said it's like Chinese tea, Arabian coffee. This one is like Russian candy canes, but you either have like red and white striped costumes with hula hoops, or you have like full Russian garb. I did the Russian dance when I was a kid and I had one of those like little fuzzy hats. So it's really either Russian or candy cane. But also I did research and candy canes are German. So I have a lot of questions about this dance, but the music is a banger. Then we have Mother Ginger. Mother Ginger comes out with this giant skirt, and when I mean giant, I mean it takes up the whole stage. And she like lifts up her skirt and like small children run out, and those are the bonbons. Or I think there's another name for them, like planchelier. I think Mother Ginger is supposed to be French. Then after Mother Ginger, you have Marzipan. Now, Marzipan is another one that's kind of like Russian, where it's either marzipan or they're shepherds, like shepherdesses, or you get women playing reed pipes, which is like a flute. And now the song is actually, I think, played on reed pipes, which is probably where they get that last one. But yeah, it's either marzipan or sheep. So, and then after that, we get to the Waltz of the Flowers. Now, again, we're in Candyland. So why? It's like, oh, welcome to the land of sweets. And then you're like, okay, cool. Coffee, tea. I mean, I guess tea isn't really a sweet anyway, but like, you're like, okay, coffee, tea, chocolate, candy canes. And the next thing you know, you're like, sheep and flowers? Like, I don't personally eat flowers. Maybe you are a gopher and you do. The Waltz of the Flowers, probably one of the most iconic dances. So all of the flowers dance together. And that's kind of like the end of the banquet ceremony. Maybe it's like throwing flowers on stage after a performance, like since that's the end of the performance, it's the Waltz of the Flowers. let's go with that. I think that's a good answer. I just made it up right now with no backing evidence, but sure, let's call it that. Then we have the Sugar Plum Fairy dancing with her cavalier. Now, her cavalier is not the Nutcracker in most renditions. I think there's a couple where like the Nutcracker does dance with her, but usually the cavalier is for the Sugar Plum Fairy. It's not the Nutcracker, okay? So we have Clara and the Nutcracker, and then the cavalier and the Sugar Plum Fairy. Then we have the final waltz, which is usually everybody from Candyland, the Land of the Sweets. It's not Candyland is a board game. We have everybody from the Land of the Sweets, and it usually ends with them all waving as Clara leaves the Land of Sweets with the prince. If you have the budget for it, they'll sometimes be like in a sleigh that like literally flies across the stage. Sometimes she wakes up like on a bench. Sometimes she just like holds her Nutcracker. Sometimes Drosselmeyer peeks back in. That is my very, very short and concise and not rambling at all plot summary of the Nutcracker. I hope I put you a little bit in the holly jolly festive spirit. I hope you enjoyed. Happy holidays, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye.